comics, what usually comes to mind? I imagine most of you think of Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, things for kids or geeks like in The Big Bang Theory. But I think comics can be so much more than that. I'm Jordan Galt, and I'm here to tell you how comics are not just for geeks and kids, and that they can be just as legitimate of an art form as any storytelling medium. A good place to start, I think, would be to define comics. The technical definition is the sequential juxtaposition of pictorial images used to convey a message or a story. I tell you this because nowhere in the definition does it say what a comic should be about. It doesn't mention superheroes or anything like that. That seems like a really obvious thing to point out, but given our stereotypical image of a comic, it's good to make the point that they can be about anything and everything, and they often are. Take, for example, Art Spiegelman's Maus. This is a comic that breaks pretty much every convention you can think of. To begin with, all the characters are mice. And from this cartoonish starting point, it goes on to be a really horrific story about his father. It's a biographical work. His father was a Polish Jew who survived the Nazi death camps. And not only does this tell about the horrors of Nazi Germany, but it's also a moving father and son story about how Art Spiegelman comes to terms with both his father's history and his own family's past. Another good example of something like this would be Wandering Son. This tackles a subject that isn't heard of most often in social commentary. It tells the story of a boy in middle school who realizes after a while that he doesn't want to be a boy. He wants to be a girl. And it goes through this without being bombastic or making a lot of social points. It just quietly follows his life and documents how he feels when he's not comfortable in his own skin. It touches the story with a deep humanity and a lot of depth and maturity that you probably wouldn't expect from a medium like this. But at the end of the day, it makes a very good point about someone who would seem very different from you, but in a lot of ways is very similar. Now, this isn't to say that all comics that are mature aren't superhero comics. There are some that are just as deep and just as thought-provoking that deal with superheroes. Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns is a great example. This revolutionized the idea of Batman back in the 80s, and he took Bruce Wayne as retired Batman in his 50s and painted a psychological picture of a man tormented by his past, struggling with the dark obsession that was Batman and trying to let go of the rage that has consumed him since he was a child. He fails to do that, falls back into his crime-fighting ways, but more than anything, the story challenges what you think justice is, and it makes a world where nothing is black and white, it's all gray. Good and evil don't have the same connotations that they do, and at the end of the day, the comic forces you to think about a lot of the questions in a different way you see when confronting a cruel and unjust world. These are just a few examples of how comics can be different and delve deeper than you might expect. And one last thing I'd like to point out, not too long ago, about 200 years or so, novels were considered a frivolous art form. Real literary work was done in poetry, and if you were writing novels, you were writing trash. Now, novel writers are very highly acclaimed, and the right novel can make you seem like a really smart guy in public. So maybe one day, comics can be just as highly regarded as an art form as they should be.